The United States stands at the brink of a major conflict in the Middle East. This weekend, new anti-government protests erupted at two universities in Iran as the regime grapples with domestic discontent and the threat of U.S. strikes. CBS's Charlie D'Agata is in Tel Aviv with new reporting. So, Charlie, what can you tell us?
Good evening, Tom. Iran's foreign minister is still pushing for a diplomatic solution to the rising tensions in the region as the United States floods this region with the kind of American firepower not seen here in the Middle East since the invasion of Iraq in 2003. Firepower like the USS Ford aircraft carrier, almost within striking distance in the Mediterranean Sea. Heavy lift transport planes taking off from the UK, and F-35 stealth fighter jets filmed on a runway on the Greek island of Crete. Iran is on a full court press trying to talk America out of an all-out war.
Thank you so much for having me.
Iran's foreign minister spoke with Face the Nation's Margaret Brennan.
Right now we are negotiating only nuclear, and there is no other subject.
But Iran also has one of the largest arsenals of ballistic missiles in the region. Israeli intelligence sources we spoke with confirmed stockpiles are back to the same levels seen before Israel and the U.S. launched attacks last June.
And now we are even in a better situation than previous war. So, as a matter of fact, we are in a powerful position to defend ourselves.
Israel and many U.S. bases are within missile range. And President Trump is growing increasingly impatient with the Iranian regime, says Special Envoy Steve Witkoff.
He's curious as to why they haven't, I don't want to use the word capitulated, but why they haven't capitulated.
Witkoff and his team are now scheduled to meet with the Iranian delegation in Geneva on Thursday. And on Saturday, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is scheduled to come here to Israel. That diplomatic timeline doesn't rule out military action, Tom. When the U.S. bombed Iran last June, President Trump gave Iran a 14-day window to comply to demands, then bombed 3 days later.
Trump warned Friday that limited strikes on Iran are possible. The president is pressuring Iran's government to dismantle its nuclear program. The warning comes as the United States ramps up its firepower in the Middle East. On Friday, the USS Gerald Ford aircraft carrier and 3 other warships entered the Mediterranean Sea. There are currently 13 U.S. Navy vessels in the Middle East, including another carrier, the USS Abraham Lincoln. It is the largest military buildup in the region since the Iraq War in 2003. For more, we're joined from Washington by CBS News national security contributor Samantha Vinograd. Sam, good morning.
Good morning.
So how close are we to military action against Iran?
Well, with the arrival of these additional military assets, Vlad, the president now has maximum optionality when it comes to deciding whether, when, and how he wants to conduct a strike against Iran. He now has the option to not just launch strikes into Iran, but also ostensibly to ensure that to the best extent possible, U.S. forces, U.S. personnel in the region are protected if Iran chooses to retaliate. So we are much closer to war than we were before, and the president is much better prepared to launch not just limited strikes, but a more extensive and prolonged military campaign that could have real repercussions for the American people.
This is CB News. Subscribe to our channel for daily world news update. Stay tuned.
So, Sam, Iran is saying that they're working on finalizing a deal to propose to the U.S. Is there really a diplomatic off-ramp here?
There may be a diplomatic off-ramp, Adriana, but the timelines may just be off. I was involved in the early days of the Iran nuclear deal under President Obama. That deal took more than 20 months to negotiate, and President Trump has given a very short timeline for these negotiations. So what it's really going to come back to is whether the president's team assesses that Iran is actually committed to these negotiations, whether Iran is committed to giving up its nuclear stockpile, which is something it hasn't been open to in the past. And that's normally an intelligence community assessment, something that President Trump has in the past personally tried to decipher.
Sam, we know that with all those military assets in the region, that a strike package would cripple Iran. But the question becomes, to me, what happens after you've struck Iran? If there is regime change in the cards, what does that look like?
Well, Vlad, Iran may feel very far away to the American people, but there's certainly repercussions for Americans themselves. On the one hand, Iran will retaliate. They have the largest and most diverse ballistic missile stockpile in the region. They will likely try to hit U.S. bases, U.S. personnel. They've demonstrated both the intent and capability to strike Americans abroad throughout their history. At the same time, they could try to close a waterway known as the Strait of Hormuz, which could send oil prices much higher. That could impact the price at the pump as we head into the spring and summer. And so that could have very real implications for the American people, even if there's not an effort at Iranian regime change.
Sam, as our viewers remember, when the U.S. struck Iran's nuclear facilities last summer, the president said they were completely obliterated. What is then the state of the threat from Iran?
Well, President Trump's own team does not agree that they were completely obliterated. His own national security strategy says they were significantly damaged. But here's what we do know. We do know that the American strikes did damage some of Iran's nuclear enrichment facilities and a research facility. But we also know that Iran still has a stockpile of what's known as highly enriched uranium. That's material, if enriched further, could be used to break out to a bomb. We also know that Israeli efforts did successfully eliminate some of Iran's top nuclear scientists, so their intellectual capital has suffered. So the question now is, where is their nuclear stockpile? Are they trying to get more of the equipment needed to enrich more uranium? And do they have the capability still to engage in what's called weaponization, actually making a weapon? And the million-dollar question, Adriana, is, do they want to break out to a bomb? And that is going to underline the conversation about whether Iran is committed to negotiations or not, or if they're just biding time.
All right, Samantha Vinograd, thank you so much.
CB News, bringing you World News Update. Thank you for watching.